So in the midst of recording this broadcast, the title changes. For the worse, I'll get there in a second. You've heard all the wranglings over what was the border and Ukraine bill. I'll just summarize there. That eventually became the Ukraine bill. That the Senate worked over the Super Bowl weekend on. As they pushed for Ukraine funding, despite all the conservative tactics, or so they state. This bipartisan coalition of senators, but just wait for it for a moment. There's something a whole lot more to this bill. But these senators on Monday night took another step towards passing funding, well, until just a few moments ago, for Ukraine, Israel, and other defense priorities. They voted then 66-33 to end debate on the $95 billion package. $60 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel, $9 billion for humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza, the West Bank, and Ukraine, and $4.8 billion to support allies in the Indo-Pacific. But, of course, no funding going towards the continental United States. Of course not. Secure everybody else's borders, but not ours. Should we be surprised? Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, touting, of course, is a down payment for the survival of Western democracy. Now we get a little closer to the truth. In the absence of having received a single border policy change from the Senate, the House will have to continue to work on its own. This was Mike Johnson, of course, most considering this dead when it hits the House floor. But McConnell is the center focus now, isn't he? He is the one who laid the biggest trap. Not for Democrats, oh no, for Donald Trump. Many senators fighting back. Ted Cruz, Rand Paul calling it outrageous. But McConnell pushed back on his critics by arguing that the nation's policymakers can't afford to play politics at the expense of the nation's security. But I just showed you, there's nothing in here for our nation. It is for other nations. But then Mitch gives it away, of course. He warned Sunday the global order in which American support is craved and American strength is feared is in doubt. Okay. And we, the United States of America, have the most to lose, he stated. Going ahead and throwing some barbs at his colleagues, saying the only reason they're opposing it is because of me. But you see, Mitch, you got a bigger problem. Because what you shoved in here, this has to be the end of the road for Mitch McConnell. Because of what you shoved in here. Because of what you did to him. It's a story we're not just going to let slip away. And now that you've passed the controversial foreign aid bill, as I said, the story changed. You put Trump right in the Ukraine trap, didn't you? Let me explain to my audience exactly what you did. All right, my friends, a little housekeeping before we move back into the broadcast, and my request, as it is every day, to make sure you continue to check that you're still subscribed, still stands. Every day I get comments that people realizing they had been unsubscribed. If you're new to the channel, please make sure you subscribe. We bring you news here. We bring you news over at Lisa Haven's channel. We bring you news at Restricted Republic, our combined platform we created to bring you all the news that matters. If you haven't been there today, I want to offer you RR39. Pretty easy discount code, huh? RR39. That's $39 annually. And I'm going to give you that rate for 3 years. That is a very special offer. RR39. Just put it in annual discount code and get $39 a year for 3 years. To view a catalog beyond what most would imagine, information that would take you months to ever get through. But right now, again, use discount code RR39, annual checkout. Get there today. But now let's get back to this broadcast. So let's tread forward into this trap that has been laid for Trump and how it relates to the Senate now passing this controversial bill and why it should lend to the end of the road for Mitch McConnell, who says the border deal won't become law due to GOP disagreement after he supported the border bill, then didn't support it because he got pushback, then stripped out the border provisions, and then ended up getting it passed anyway. There's a lot more details to this, and it all is really centered around 2 Washington Post articles. And I'm going to show you both of them. One that J.D. Vance talked about, and one that they say J.D. Vance is full of BS. And I'll show you exactly why J.D. Vance was correct. The new Ukrainian bill tries to make it illegal for Trump to do what he has promised on the campaign trail. It's a plot against the President Trump, plain and simple. And the plan is actually rather plain and simple. So this is the second article from Washington Post. J.D. Vance's sloppy effort to turn MAGA world against Ukraine funding. A big title when you put it in light to what they published prior. I'll get there in a moment. It is not surprising, then, that Vance opposes efforts underway in the Senate to approve a $95 billion bill that includes additional money, which is now passed, for Ukraine. Which is surprising. What is surprising is the misleading and probably dishonest argument Vance is making against the legislation, one focused on riling up Donald Trump's most fervent supporters. These funds expire on September 30th of 2025, nearly a year into the possible second term of President Trump, Vance explained in a memo that he says he sent to every Republican in Congress on Monday. They responded. Don't worry about that. Then the warning. These are the exact same accounts President Trump was impeached for pausing in December of 2019. This is in the Washington Post article. They're stating that J.D. Vance is engaging in a misleading effort to overturn this legislation, this funding. If President Trump were to withdraw from or pause financial support for the war in Ukraine in order to bring the conflict to a peaceful conclusion over the objections of career experts, he says in the memo, it would amount to the same fake violation of budget law from the first impeachment under markedly similar facts and circumstances. But of course, Washington Post says the 2019 impeachment wasn't centrally about Trump's withholding funds from Ukraine, but why he did so, stating that, of course, it was to get an investigation into Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. That is the claim that Washington Post is making to dismiss J.D. Vance's efforts that Trump could be impeached based on this very bill if he were to pause funding. That is the central argument that they're trying to distract from. So let's just go into a prior article published January 26th of 2024. This year, U.S. war plans for Ukraine don't foresee retaking lost territory. It states in it, future-proofing Ukraine against Trump. According to U.S. officials, the American document, the funding, will guarantee support for short-term military operations as well as build a future Ukrainian military force that can deter Russian aggression. It will include specific promises and programs to help protect, reconstitute, and expand Ukraine's industrial and export base and assist the country with political reforms needed for full integration into Western institutions. Not incidentally, a U.S. official said. The hope is that the long-term promise, again, assuming congressional buy-in, will also future-proof aid for Ukraine against the possibility that former President Donald Trump wins re-election. I don't know how much clearer cut it can be that the Washington Post states directly future-proofing Ukraine against Trump. J.D. Vance's sloppy effort to turn MAGA world against Ukrainian funding. This is literally how it works in the mainstream media. It is so easy to blow holes in. So I guess then we can take J.D. Vance's argument as being accurate. He published this article on the American Conservative, the Republican plot against Donald Trump. Let's go into the details. He starts by saying the obsession with funding endless war in Ukraine is intentionally or not an effort with the GOP establishment to stop the election of Donald J. Trump. It's a plot against the president, a trap for the president. In this, he states, in the article he states, why do you guys want to give these people such a gift? It's stupid. That was from Trump. It was an accurate point, but it didn't change anyone's mind because most of us already agreed with the former president that this funding should never go through. So the deal fell apart, and the way it fell apart was at the height of political malpractice. The text, 370 pages of it, dropped late Sunday, February 4th. We had a Republican conference meeting on Monday, well before anyone had time to digest the major provisions. McConnell left the meeting and praised the bill, but criticized the changing political dynamics. He blamed Donald Trump. He blamed the House of Representatives. Why does my bill not pass? So, to save face, he comes back out and says that no one should support it because he got caught, plain and simple, in the provisions that were listed within the full version of this bill. Remembering that the American voter does not support additional funding. The majority of American voters do not support additional funding. First, voters range from ambivalent to outright hostile of future Ukraine aid. Second, a subset of Republican senators are obsessed with Ukraine aid, caring about this issue more than any other. You got to ask yourself, why? Well, you saw when Mitch McConnell and the statements of the global order, Western democracy, you start to understand this is bigger and they don't want anyone standing in the way of it. And that anyone right now is spelled Trump. So they put provisions in there to make sure that he could never uproot this aid going to Ukraine. It's a very strange stance, isn't it? Third, a majority of House Republicans oppose further aid and demand stronger border security measures, regardless of the details of the Ukraine package. It's why, more than likely, Mike Johnson will stand in the way of this. However, they put a tripwire in there for him also. It's easy to sketch out how these facts will manifest themselves in our political reality. The Senate Ukraine bill goes to the House, where leadership there cannot bring it up to the floor without endangering House Speaker Mike Johnson. So the House will either refuse to vote on the bill or will attach a stronger border security bill like H.R. 2 and then send it back to the Senate. In public and private, Senate Republican leadership will undermine the House leadership and the Republican presidential nominee by stating that they're standing in the way, that they're using political games to derail what is necessary for the security of the United States of America. How dare those House Republicans led by Donald J. Trump, who is their trumpeter, leading the pack. You see how this all works? But of course, they have an insurance plan, even if Trump pulls it off. Though few have noticed, buried in the bill's text is a kill switch for the next Trump presidency. The legislation explicitly requires funding for Ukraine well into the next presidential term. The Washington Post, which I read to you, has already reported this provision was added to control Donald J. Trump. It gets worse. Back in 2019, Democrats articulated a novel theory of impeachment based on Trump's refusal to spend money for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. 5 years after impeaching Trump for refusing to spend money on Ukraine, they've drafted a new law that again requires Trump to spend money on Ukraine. If he negotiates a peace settlement and stops that funding, he'll automatically be impeached again. As if this isn't a breach of the separation of powers, the legislature controlling the executive office, just calling it what it is. But for them, this is perfectly normal. Boy, you don't tell me that they know who's walking into that office, huh? Matt Gaetz, JD is correct. This bill is an impeachment trap. Marjorie Taylor Greene, dead on arrival in the House. Any Republican that votes for this, career will be over. Rand Paul, Republicans need to be aware that this bill, supported by Mitch McConnell and almost all of the Senate GOP leadership, sets in motion the next hyper-partisan Trump impeachment before he's even elected. We have a consensus. This is what just happened. All hell just broke loose, and the Senate triggered it all. And J.D. Vance, who everybody wanted to dismiss and Washington Post attempted to dismiss, however, Washington Post already reinforced his argument just a little bit over a month prior. Amazing how it works, the gamesmanship. But when you are propaganda news, that is how it works. Now, most likely, Mike Johnson will reject this package. He will attempt to add back in border details. They will use that against him. They will use it against the House GOP. They will use it against Donald J. Trump. That may very well have been the second trap put within this funding bill. The Senate fully well knows that's exactly what's going to happen. And they are trying to pull out every trick in the book to assure they can stop Trump, who right now is a freight train that no one's going to stop from being elected. But I guess the only guy we can really ask is Mitch McConnell now, correct? So, Mitch, what are your thoughts on this? Did you set a trap for Donald J. Trump?
What are my thoughts about what?
Did you lay a trap for Donald J. Trump? I'll say it again.
Did you hear the question, Senator?
Yes, the question was, Mitch, did you lay a trap for Donald J. Trump? I'll ask again if you're okay, sir.
All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute.
Oh, you're going to need a lot more than a minute, because everyone is now learning how to interpret much better this American political landscape where Republican and Democrat are all ultimately one in the same. When they use terms like the global order and Western democracy, it's no longer U.S. first, it's Ukraine first, U.S. last. And that is the polar opposite of, well, MAGA, as they like to say, which is make America great again first, never last. I love you all. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. Justus Knight, signing out.